Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about a world where instead of trying to influence politics, we essentially abandon politics in the way that we understand politics. This is the kind of thing I want to talk to you about tonight. I don't want to talk about how we win elections. I want to talk about how we make elections irrelevant. I want to talk about how we win the culture so that elections are automatic. Automatic. The election is automatic. We don't have to worry about getting out the vote. We don't have to worry about a narrow pathway to 271 electoral votes. We don't have to worry about any of that. We win the argument before the election, so what happens on election day is irrelevant. Of course we're going to win the election. Of course we will. I don't want to talk about politics anymore. I'm tired of talking about politics. But the beautiful point about what we're going to do tonight is, it's not important that I come up and give you a speech, because the days of people standing up and telling you about values and stuff are over. We have to all be in this fight now. This has to be an interactive thing where every single one of you has areas of expertise. Every single one of you are extremely good at something. And we're going to need every single one of you who is going to have to figure out what the thing you are best at in the world, and you're going to have to put this into this stew. Because the hour is late now and we are in serious trouble. Serious trouble. We're going to need the very best of everybody, and that doesn't mean walking petitions, and it doesn't mean donating to campaigns. It means, what are you good at? What are you passionately good at? And how can you use that to help recover this country from this band of Marxists that has hijacked it through the culture? Through the culture. They did it through the culture. They didn't do it through politics. They didn't do it at the ballot box. They could never win elections, ever, standing on what they believed, so they simply came in through the culture, like a virus, infiltrated the system, and now they own the culture. You cannot fight your own culture and win. This is the message of 2012. People voted for Barack Obama in an awful economy, in an incredibly bad situation, knowing that he was going to cause more ruin because he was cooler than Mitt Romney, but really because Mitt Romney and the Republicans don't believe their own message. And one of the things we're going to do tonight is we're going to give you an example of what it sounds like if you actually believe your own message. So we'll get to that. Because we're heading into the post-government world one way or another. We are going to head into a post-government world either through our conscious willingness effort to change the way we govern ourselves, or we're going to head into a post-government world because there won't be any government and we'll be sitting around burning tires, roasting rats on spits. But one way or another, we are heading into a post-government world. As my friend Jeremy Boring likes to point out, we owe $100 trillion. That's more money than there is in the entire world. If we took all the money there is in the entire world, we couldn't pay the bills that we've already committed ourselves to. This will not last. Everybody knows it. The last chance we had to turn this thing around politically, to turn it around incrementally, to start paying down debt, disappeared 7 days ago. So at least now we have the moral clarity to understand that the pathway for reform through politics is closed. We're going to continue to lose elections by a wider and wider margin for the rest of time if we don't stop playing politics. Because they won this fight by getting into the culture. And before I get into the details of this speech tonight, everybody says, what does he mean by the culture? So let me just give you a little example. If I was a political operative for the left, and I wanted to have some exercise over your mind, if I wanted to know if I controlled your mind space, you might be able to say that if I were able to start a sentence, and you could finish the sentence, especially if it was a political slogan, I'd own you, right? If I could start a sentence, you could finish it, I would own you. So, I'll start a couple of sentences, and you can finish them for me. Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed. None of you had to go to the Sherwood Schwartz website and learn the intricate details of the story of Gilligan's Island. None of you had to have a flyer handed to you talking about the lyrics of the Ballad of Jed Clampett. None of you had any of that. You just took it in through the culture. Last thing I want to do is bash Mitt Romney. I didn't like him ideologically, but every moment I saw more of him, the better I liked him as a man, and the better person I thought he was. And I think he ran the best campaign that Mitt Romney could have run, and I want to just get that said. But the problem with Mitt Romney, and the problem with the Republican National Committee, and the problem with virtually every single Republican politician in the world today is they don't believe their own their own values. They believe them privately. Mitt Romney obviously privately believes in wealth creation because he's worth a lot of money. But he doesn't believe it publicly. And again, I have to point to my friend Jeremy Boring out there who points this out to me constantly. Jeremy Boring said the reason that Republican candidates don't believe what Republicans want them to believe is because they're victims of Stockholm Syndrome. They've been beaten up by the culture for so long that it is so essential for them to show that they're nice guys and not evil and not vampires and not cancer-causing, corporate raiders. And so they're so eager to appease the pop culture and the cool kids and the press, and they want George Clooney to like them, and they want to get invited to the cocktail parties and all this other stuff. They get so beaten up by this psychically, which is why the left has been effective. They've controlled the pop culture. Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale. They own us. I was out there trying to promote the message. And we tried to sell the message. And then the RNC tried to give us a messenger. But the messenger didn't believe the message. And I'll give you a couple of examples how you know that Mitt Romney didn't believe the message. When they said, Mitt Romney, you've got $300 million and you're obviously very rich and you're out of touch with the American people, he ran from it. He was ashamed of it. He wouldn't release his tax returns because he was afraid that if the American people saw how much money he made and how some of his money was put overseas, then he would lose the argument. That's a guy who doesn't believe his own party, his own philosophy. This guy doesn't believe his own life story, for God's sakes. We'll get to this in a minute, but let me give you an example of what I would have done if I'd been Mitt Romney and somebody said, Mr. Romney, you've got $300 million. Do you feel that makes you out of touch with the American people? My response would have been, well, first of all, I don't have $300 million. I have $327 million. And I work very hard for every one of them, so please don't take $27 million out of my bank account that I work very hard for. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say in answer to your question is, I have $327 million because people voluntarily gave me their money. I didn't take any of it at gunpoint, not a penny, not one. Every single dollar of the $327 million in my bank account was given to me by people who gave me a dollar in exchange for perceived value. So I earned that money. People voluntarily gave me that money, and they felt that I gave them their money's worth. That's number two. And number three, if you look at the tax returns, which I released before I ran for office, you'll see that I paid $67 million in taxes over the course of my lifetime. That's a lot more into the entitlement state than Barack Obama's ever paid. So how am I the bad guy as far as helping the common people of America who don't have jobs? I'm paying for their food stamps. I'm paying for them. Barack Obama's paying a small portion of it, and community organizers are paying precisely nothing. They're taking. I've paid $70 million in taxes over the course of my life. I'm proud to pay it.
Plus charity.
Yeah. So he didn't own it. He didn't own it, and people could tell that he was running from his own self. Not just his own, he's running from himself. We had a conversation just a moment ago before we started. Somebody said, Mitt Romney, he didn't want to release his tax returns because he has money overseas. And if I'm Mitt Romney, somebody says, Mitt Romney, you've got $40 million of your assets in overseas accounts. You care to talk to the American people about that? I said, I'd love to. I have $40 million of my assets in overseas accounts because that's a smart place to put the money. I have a moral obligation and a duty to my investors to take the very best care of their money that I possibly can. I have an obligation and a duty to them. And if the smart place to put the money is overseas, then that's the smart place to put the money, and that's what I'm going to do. So instead of us having the conversation about me having money in overseas accounts, why don't we have a conversation about why the smart thing is to have American money in overseas accounts? Why don't we have a conversation about what a country would look like if the smart thing was to put money in American accounts? Why don't we have a conversation about what is it about the American tax rate and regulatory structure that means that anybody with a brain is putting their money overseas? Isn't that the problem? I don't put my money overseas because I don't love America. I put my money overseas because I'm a money manager and my job is to grow money funds for people. That's what I get paid to do. And the reason I'm running for president is because I don't want the smart play to be putting money overseas. I want the smart play is to put money here. And I want every single money manager on the face of the earth to understand that the smart place to put the money is in America. Right. Yeah. That's what a guy who believes what he believes sounds like. So, the problem is not just the message, the problem is also the messenger. Important. So when you want to talk about owning the pop culture, I'm going to give you a quick aside. I'm not here to promote anything, but just to give you a quick idea. Starting on January 1st, on Inauguration Day, I am going to do a video, and I'm going to do an inauguration speech, and for the next 4 years, I'm going to be the virtual president of the United States of America. to be the virtual president of the United States of America. We're going to have inaugural speeches on inaugural day. We'll give State of the Union addresses on State of the Union day. We're going to take the actual questions that actual reporters ask the press secretary, and I'm going to answer them as the president of the United States. And people say, is this a publicity stunt? Of course it is. It's not a publicity, but it's not a publicity stunt for me because I don't need the publicity. It's a publicity stunt for the values, for the ideas, for the arguments. And what I want to do by being virtual president of the United States is I want every single American, not just conservatives, I want every single American to have access to see like, oh, that's what it should have been like. That's what a guy who believes in America would have said to that question. You've got to set up a contrast. You've got to set up an alternative. They've never had this. All they have is them, all about them all the time. I think this thing could get some traction. I really do. So it's the question is, Mr. President, what was the situation in Benghazi? And please tell us about your response. Well, as you know, in Benghazi, the situation was unclear. Needless to say, the first thing I did when I found out that our embassy was under attack was I immediately authorized the launch of an extremist fast reaction team. They got to Benghazi 2.5 hours after we first got indication that they were under fire. They unfortunately weren't able to save any of those brave men, and 14 of the Americans we sent in to rescue those people were killed in the firefight that ensued. People saying it's a catastrophe, it's not a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe not to go rescue our own people. I spent 14 SEALs' lives trying to save people. We didn't save any of them. We had a helicopter crash. I'd do it again tomorrow. Of course we went to rescue our people. And furthermore, the first order I gave when I found out that our embassy was under attack was I ordered people, I talked to our military advisors, I said, where's our nearest aircraft carrier group? They said, it's about 45 minutes away, Mr. President. I said, well, we're not going to go bomb these people because we don't know who's who and we're not going to murder innocent civilians, but I am directing you now to make sure that F-18s are over Benghazi, and I want them supersonic. I want them supersonic over that city at 300 feet. I want to break every single window in that city and they can bill us. Bill us. I don't want to hurt anybody, I don't want to kill anybody because we don't know what's going on, but I want sonic booms over that town once a minute for the next 4 hours so that our people know that we're here and their people know that we're coming. That's what I ordered as President of the United States, and I accept full responsibility for my actions. Next question. That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. Let's take questions later. So, let's move on. In our country, the United States of America, its declaration and its constitution was the product of a first wave agricultural culture. Very dispersed, very independent, very rugged, very leave me alone. I'm on a farm. I don't need your help. I want you to keep the Indians away and keep the British away. And other than that, I'm growing my own food and so on. So the first wave of human civilization was what our idea of America was built on. Limited government, dispersed. Electoral college, all of this stuff, disperse power to the states, disperse power to locals, disperse power to the people. Ultimately, the great thing about the Constitution is the 10th Amendment. Those powers not dedicated to the federal government by the province of the state or reserved to the people. The entire model of America changed from being an agrarian, open, independent, free society to being concentrated in the cities. In the cities. Huge amounts of immigrants coming to the cities to work in factories. Now, when you have that kind of an economy, this is McCotter's point, when you have that kind of an economy, you must have a government that will reflect that economy. And that old agrarian, original founders model no longer worked in an industrial era with cities. And so what happened to the federal government? The federal government, which used to be very dispersed, like the population in an agrarian society, became very concentrated, very federal, very big, very vertical, very massive, very, very gigantic, monolithic thing. The government had to change because the economy changed, because the entire society changed. The government didn't lead this, the government followed it. So the reason we have this gigantic, huge government is because of the industrial age model of the economy that it was based on. But this is the part that's so brilliant. This is the part when McCotter said this, I just about lost my mind. He said, vertical government, vertical economy, but what McCotter said was, when you live in a world where you can do this, where I can pull this out of my pocket and order steel from China, we are no longer in an industrial age world. And everybody knows it. We're now in the information age. We're now in the information age. So IBM doesn't exist anymore. IBM's irrelevant. Google, Apple, Facebook. Nobody talks about IBM anymore. Nobody talks about General Motors anymore. They're dinosaurs. They're on their way out. And this is the great hope for all of us in our idea of freedom, is that this giant monolithic government that was designed for an industrial age is already obsolete. McCarter said this verbatim. He said, it's going to fall whether we win elections or lose elections. It's going to go away because something this big, this massive, this solid, this fossilized, this giant, old, stupid, blundering, blind giant that just walks through life and destroys everything in its path is not fit to govern people who suddenly can become free agents and do whatever they want to. People can order parts from China on their cell phones in the middle of the night at a restaurant. That government cannot run an economy like this, and it won't, and it will fall. It will go from vertical to horizontal, as McCarter said. So now we start to get into the final stage of this thing in terms of what does a post-government future look like? And if there was a world where a series of networks existed where you could plug yourself into networks and get paid for all the things that you're good at, suddenly everything changes, doesn't it? It all changes. And this terror of what we're seeing coming our way with all these regulations suddenly seems very small and ancient. It's so remarkable to me how these people who call themselves progressives are so utterly mired in this caloric, fossilized dinosaur model of the world. So we're going to beat these people because the economy is changing. The giant state is going away. This entitlement model that may have worked on a population of 100 million people where 1 in 5 was taking benefits is not going to work where 5 in 1 are taking benefits. It's not going to work, it's going to collapse. So what's going to be in its place? Well, we don't really know. We don't really know. But to close, I'll just say this. One of the things that we're going to have to do in the next 4 years as we start to get the giant political and cultural scene underway. The immediate goal that I have as an individual, and certainly that I'm going to be trying to do politically, is twofold. And I don't say this out of meanness, and I don't say this out of spite. I don't want to see anybody hurt, or I don't want to see anybody suffer. But the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that people who vote for socialism feel the consequences of voting for socialism. They are cannibalizing capitalism. They're voting for socialism, living in a capitalist society. If I run a business and I have to cut 4 people out of my business because of these regulations that people voted for, Barack Obama is not dictator and he's not emperor. He wants to be, but he's not. People voted him into office. People made a decision for this. So if I have to cut 4 people from my sales staff, I'm going to cut the 4 people with an Obama bumper sticker. I am. Liberals are going to howl. They're going to say it's malicious, it's mean-spirited, it's revengeful. On the contrary, you voted for big state socialism that is making it virtually impossible to run a business. That was your decision. You made a decision, and the reason you made that decision was because you didn't think you'd feel any pain over it. I'm going to get stuff, it's not going to cost me anything. Wrong. No, you're out of a job. You wanted big state benefits? Have your food pellet. Congratulations, you're unemployed. And furthermore, you're unemployed in an economy that gets worse and worse every year because of your choices. Because you empowered this. You made a decision for it. So of course we're going to fire you. I'm not going to fire a person who's voted for making my life easier so that I could grow this pie so we can all do better. I'm not going to punish that person. I'm going to punish the person who thought that I am a food source for you. I'm not your employer. I'm a host organism. You're simply going to take more and more and more, and I'm expected to work harder and harder and harder and harder and harder, and you're not going to pay for anything. You're just going to get fatter and fatter and fatter until I waste away and die. No. No. You will now have to suffer the consequences for your decision. I don't know how to make that happen exactly, but we've got some time to think about it. But it has to happen. And the flip side of this, in the next weeks and months, the flip side of making them pay for their socialism is we have to protect our own people. What I mean by that is when we talk about these networks and things, that means that we ultimately have to protect our own people. We are now working Americans who understand this whole thing, are now officially a minority. And whenever you look at how minorities hire people, you always see the same thing, and it makes perfect sense. If you have a small Italian population, they hire other Italians because they're bringing in their family from the old country. You always see Jews hire Jews whenever when they're repressed. When society is free and open and anybody can hire anybody, then you hire the best person. But when you are a minority, a repressed and despised minority, people start taking care of their own. Because we're tired of being a food source. Mechanisms. But one little thing to think about in terms of what a post-government future looks like is something that Jeremy and I talk about called term is it's such a good term. I mean, it's a really good term. It's a voluntary microtax. It's such a great term. It must have been me since it's. Let's give you an example. Declaration Entertainment, which is a company that Jeremy owns and which produces the firewalls, is a voluntary microtax. In other words, if you go and see movies, you don't like movies, you don't like what you're getting, you can become a member of Declaration Entertainment. He's about to release a movie called The Arroyo, which is utterly finished. It's about the situation in Arizona with the border. It's high noon with pickup trucks and cell phones. It's a man defending his property against these murderers with his own guns. Now, if you like movies like that, you can voluntarily pay a little extra and get movies like that. But let's take a big example. Let's take the biggest example. Let's say you're one of those people out there who thought that July 20th of 1969 was the high point of not only of American history, was human history. When Neil Armstrong put his boot on the moon, that was utterly it. That was it. So let's just take the example of the toughest thing that can happen in the world, landing on the moon. How would you do that without the government? Well, I'm going to start something called the Free Frontier Foundation. It's going to be a 501c3. And for $9.99 a month on your credit card, you can be a part of this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to buy a little jet for $800,000, and we're going to fly around the country promoting the Free Frontier, and just through a regular lottery for your $9.95 a month, you get to fly with Bill Whittle in a high-performance jet. When we have enough members so that we can go and buy Spaceship Two, which is what Virgin Galactic is using, the suborbital flights, they're charging $200,000 a seat. I got to be good friends with Burt Rutan through the kindness of you people. Burt Rutan said when we sold it to Virgin Galactic, we said, we'll sell you as many as you want, but not just to you. So we're going to buy one, probably $40 million. And then we're going to take people on suborbital flights. We're going to do it once a month. So for $9.95 a month, you can go on a ride and do outer space. Not an orbital ride, but a suborbital ride. And as the membership grows, we continue to do all this. Think about the numbers, folks. $10 a month, right? If you had 1 million Americans, that's $10 million a month. It's $120 million a year. If you had 5 million Americans, 5 million Americans is $50 million a month, right? Sorry, the math just went right out of my head. How much is it? It's big money. My point is this, for 1% of the American population signed up, you would generate anywhere from $1 to $2 billion a year, and you can't build the hardware that fast. And what I would do to the American people is I would say, what are you selling? Are you selling progress? Are you selling tourism? I'm not selling any of that. I'm selling pride. I'm selling pride. So the last thing I'll do as we talk in this talk tonight is I want to tell you about my commercial for the Free Frontier, because this goes to the heart of everything we've talked about tonight. It goes to the heart of what America is, goes to the heart of how we get around things in the future. I'm going to buy a Super Bowl ad with the money from our membership, and the Super Bowl ad's going to look like this. HD TV, and you're going to see a lander on the moon. It's not the Apollo lander, it's a little more advanced than that. You're going to see a hatch open, and you're going to see a spacesuited figure come down, and he's going to step out onto the thing. And then you're going to cut to rooms full of people, and they're going to be leaning forward, and kids are going to be gathered around. It's going to be just like it was in 1969. And then this spacesuited figure is going to get a hammer, and he's going to knock a pole into the lunar soil, and everybody's going to be leaning forward, and below that it's going to say August 18th, 2024. And then this guy's going to unfurl a flag, and he's going to salute it, and it's going to be the flag of China. It's going to be the Chinese flag, and he's going to speak in Chinese. He's going to say, another step on the long march, and it's going to be translated, and everybody's going to be looking at it, and you're going to see this Chinese astronaut on the moon saluting this Chinese flag, and you're going to hold on that shot for a second or two. And then that shot's going to just slowly pan off to the left, and you're going to see a couple of American astronauts leaning against a rope in a kind of a casual pose, and there's going to be a big domed building in the background that says the Starlight Motel vacancy. And this one American astronaut's going to turn to the other one and say, well, don't be an idiot, just go get that man's bags. And he's going to get in a rover, and he's going to drive over to where this Chinese astronaut is, and he's going to pick up his instrument packages and give it to the other guy, going to put him in the back, and as they go bouncing over the moon to this motel, this capitalist vision, it's going to, and says vacancy, he's going to say, oh, we're really glad to have you here, we'll get you a shower, we got a casino, we got all kinds of things for you. And then below that, it's going to say, Americans on the moon forever, $9.95 a month renewing on your credit card. And it's going to work. It's going to work. We don't need to get everybody. We just need to get 1 million or 2, 3 million people, and we're there. And when you show people that, when a private group of American citizens voluntarily putting $9.95 on their credit card a month land on the freaking moon, then people will know that government is finished, that the era of government is finished. And we will not be able to make that argument until we can show it to them on their own eyes, on their own TV sets.